Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the YouTube channel. So in this video, the second installment of my prep series, I'm going to touch on and go over my blood work for you. The reason I got my bloods done is simply just to make sure everything's in a good spot before heading into a contest prep. Just make sure I've not got any deficiencies that could be exaggerated even further as kind of a diet down. I kind of diet down on less food. And just to ensure my health's in a good spot to allow me to perform at my best and be my best on stage and just kind of look after myself. So I got my bloods done through Medichecks, which is a company where you kind of send your blood work out, and from there they then give you a package where you then go get your bloods done and then send it back out to them, and then they go over your results. And as a whole, like the service they provided, I think was really good. It was pretty straightforward and very informative. And something I liked about it is when you get your bloods back, they don't just be like, this is what your bloods are. They tell you, right, why it could be elevated, why it could be low, and allow you to kind of have the awareness of maybe how to address it or fix it if you're doing so yourself. But obviously, I've also got a coach, so he can then look at the blood work and kind of make changes accordingly. Which I didn't really need to make a lot of changes for, to be honest, but I'll go over that in a second. And as for like who should maybe get their blood work done, I'm no expert on this sort of thing, but just to clarify, like I don't think you necessarily need to get your blood work done if you're just someone who kind of goes to the gym and wants to kind of build a bit of muscle, especially if you're doing things like maybe not eating a consistent diet, not having consistent like fruit and veg intake, water intake, not consistently like maybe supplement with certain things. There's no point in getting it done because there's a lot of moving parts already. What I'd recommend is ensure your diet's in a good spot, you're kind of controlling everything you can to make sure it's in a good spot, and then from there, if you're doing that consistently over time and adhering to it, and you want to make sure what you're doing is actually sufficient, you're getting sufficient of maybe each nutrients in your diet, and it's actually fulfilling your needs, then you can maybe look to get done further. But it's not something you definitely need to get done starting out, and this is the first time I've actually got my blood work done myself. And I've done it through, like I said, Medichecks, who I've found the service pretty good, to be honest. And going over the results. So what I'll basically do is I'll screen record me going over the results on the screen. What they also gave you is a doctor's overview, which is when they talk through your results and tell you about, right, what does everything mean, like I touched on. And I got the ultimate performance blood test by them if anyone's interested. So most things were in a pretty much a good spot, to be honest. There's a few things that were slightly out of range, and when you look through the test, it will highlight what's in range, out of range, etc. What's outside the normal range is in red. So looking at it, it can be maybe a bit scary first of all when you see things in red. However, if you actually click on them, look into them, if it's maybe just out the outside range, it will be in red. So it's not maybe as big a deal as it might seem on the surface, if that makes sense. So as for what it basically says is my red blood cells are slightly out of range, and it kind of indicates that you could potentially retest this to maybe see if they are actually outside the range, or if it's just due to maybe the time you got the blood test done, etc. Because your bloods will, I believe, change over time. Just to clarify, I'm not an expert in blood work. I'm not that clued up on it. I'm just kind of discussing and going over my experience and my results with yourself. It also said I have slightly high levels of urea, which can be caused by dehydration, which I think is the case because I did do it first thing upon wake, so I think the reason why my urea is high is due to that reason. And it does say if you have like a high protein meal, it can also cause it as well. And I did do it fasted, meaning before eating anything, so I doubt that's the case, but like they touched on, my levels are slightly high, so not really a cause for concern. And as for cholesterol, they said that I don't really have enough good cholesterol in my diet, so if I go down and look at my cholesterol results, my HDL is very slightly low. So the ideal range is 1.1 to 5.5, mine was 1, so nothing too extreme. But to combat that and to try and fix it, I'm now going to be supplementing with krill oil alongside omega-3s, so I'm getting enough kind of healthy fatty acids in my diet, which should kind of increase it accordingly. And As well as that, it says my B12 is high, my levels of B12. Again, very marginally if I look at the results. So as a result of this, I'm just going to get a multivitamin that doesn't have B12 in it. But as you can see, it's literally just on the verge of being high. It's just in between being in the ideal range and then too high. So that's what I'm changing as a result of that. Something good about getting your blood work done is if maybe you're supplementing with vitamin D or not supplementing with it, you can see, right, according to my blood work, do I actually need to supplement with it? Do I need to supplement more than I'm currently doing? Or is what I'm doing currently sufficient? And it also, yeah, pretty much everything else was normal apart from that. So it's just maybe, again, what this has basically told me is maybe I need to, again, have more omega-3 kind of foods in my diet. And as well as that, again, it said like my red blood cells were slightly out, but I don't think that's anything to kind of stress over looking at the results, because it was extremely minor. And then to get a multivitamin without B12, that's what it's pretty much showed me. So it didn't tell me a lot. It didn't tell me I need to change a ton of things, which you could look at as bad, but you could also look at as good, because it tells me everything's in a reasonable spot. So like I touched on, red blood cells are literally very slightly outside of range, and it's not anything extreme. And like I said, it does tell you more about why everything's elevated, why everything's maybe in the ideal range or under or over. And it tells you quite a lot of things, as you can see. So things like your white blood cells, clotting status, your kidney health. That's where it kind of touched on urea, which, like I touched on, is due to maybe being dehydrated, which I'm pretty confident is the case. And it also says it's from maybe having high protein meals, which my diet also includes. So I don't think that's anything to kind of stress over, especially because my other kind of kidney markers were in a good spot. Tells you factors regarding your liver health, proteins, like your diabetes, or if you're maybe prone to being diabetic, that sort of thing, and your cholesterol status, which I went over, my HDL. Everything else is in a reasonable spot there. And also like things like your inflammation, your risk of gout, iron status. There was a sample error on my iron status, so I had to get the test redone, which I'll go over in a second. As for vitamins, the only thing that was high is vitamin B12. Vitamin D was in a good spot, which I was quite interested in finding out. Reason being is I supplement with it, and I've heard quite a few things on like podcasts, etc., that to actually get in like an ideal range, some people need to supplement with an absolute ton of vitamin D3 to actually get in that range. And it tells you things regarding maybe inflammation. In fact, I've touched on that. So yeah, thyroid hormones, your hormones, something, an interesting one for you as well. My testosterone was 21.1, which is pretty much slap bang in ideal range, maybe slightly above that. So happy days there. And what you might find is if, let's say, I'd done this after my competitive season, my testosterone might be a bit lower, just because where my body fat is at as a natural bodybuilder isn't necessarily healthy or good to have in that low spot long term. So that's something that I'd probably expect if I tested it right after a show. But just with time, gaining more body fat and not doing a ton of expenditure and being that lean, it will go back into like an appropriate spot. I also touched on my DHEA, which is again influenced by how much kind of omega-3s you have in your diet, I believe. But yeah, so that's kind of slightly low, as I touched on. And autoimmunity, it tells you kind of some stats about that. And as for the retest I done for some of the results that kind of came back skewed, or there was an error with like the sample test, I'll go over them briefly. So it says inflammation was in a good spot, the markers there, and then markers that indicate my iron status are in a good spot. So I'm obviously not low in iron, and that's what one of the things that can cause you to be anemic are, in my opinion. And obviously it said that I was just outside the ideal range in some markers that could indicate I am anemic, so that's most likely a sign that it's not due to low iron and I'm probably in a good spot health wise. So yeah, I quite enjoyed kind of the process, and it was quite interesting finding out what my blood work is. It just gives me a bit of reassurance heading into prep and helps me know, right, what should I be supplementing with, what shouldn't I, just so I can make sure I'm maximising what I'm doing, because I'm a big believer that all these marginal gains do add up. So yeah, what have I changed according to this blood test? So I have pretty much added the krill oil into my diet. I'm getting a multivitamin without vitamin B12 in it. So not a ton change, but like I said, that's most likely a good thing, because it means things are in a good spot. So hope you found this valuable. And any questions, just let me know and I'll happily answer them. So, quick update on where I'm currently at and the changes made so far this prep. So, since I last recorded, we've not had any nutritional changes as body weights continued to drop. It was pretty similar for like the majority of the week, but then it started to kind of drop again. So, I'm now sitting at 180.6 pounds with the start weight of around about 187 on average. And I've added caffeine in before my cardio, just to kind of help me get my heart rate up, as it can be like a good tool to increase BMR, which is basal metabolic rate, but pretty much meaning the amount of calories you burn. So apart from that, not really much has changed, I don't think so. I'm going to make a few changes to my training because my gym is getting an extension, which is really exciting, so that will be good, so I can kind of put out a bit of content regarding what's been made in terms of training changes and the whys behind it. So I'll be sure to kind of document that once the refurb has finished and I'm back to kind of training in that gym, which will be happening over this weekend. But yeah, just going a walk to get my haircut done. And something I like to do is, like, if I don't know, I'm going to the haircut, going to do cardio, instead of like driving there and then just having steps to do, I like to kind of get my steps in via just kind of walking to and from places when I can. I think it's just a lot more enjoyable than just going like a mindless walk for no reason. And it's pretty nice actually, like in terms of weather today, which is a nice change. So hope you've enjoyed the video. Any questions or any specific content you'd like to see during this kind of series, just give me a shout.